I'm Amy, sex educator, sex and relationship coach, and sex shop owner.
And I'm April, VP of an international high-end pleasure products company and boss queen sex toy mogul. We're best friends who make our own rules about who we are as sexual beings.
With everything from how to be a badass in the bedroom to top tips for bringing your relationship to the next level, we have something just for you.
So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Don't forget to head on over to our website at shamelesssex.com for more. And for 15% off of some of our favorite sex toys, use coupon code SHAMELESSPP in all caps at purepleasureshop.com.
You are listening to a pleasure podcast. For more from our sex podcast collective, visit pleasurepodcasts.com.
Well, hello, everyone.
Hey, everybody.
Said a chip, chop, chip into the chip, and it chip, chip, chop. You don't stop.
That was my sexy voice.
Rocking to the... Oh, I totally ignored it with my chip chops on.
I know, but I was excited about it.
Did you all know that... Have you ever heard April and I call each other Chip? Do you
Chip
all
and
know
Dale?
the origin story of Chip?
It's from Talladega Nights.
Yes, from Talladega Nights. But you and I brought you to your very first sex toy trade show in Las Vegas.
Oh, yes. That was in 2008?
9, probably.
Well, I moved. It was
Okay,
before
8 then.
I went to Asia. Yeah, it was.
Okay.
It was September of 2008.
Okay, yes. So I brought you there, and we spent 4 days in Vegas. How do we do it? For like 4 nights in Vegas.
We took a night in one night.
We did. We actually just had a night
I showed
in.
a whole table of people my pasties.
Yeah, you did, from the distributor who we ordered the pasties from. And
Yeah.
we had lots of fun. We went out to dinner, and we were just together 24/7. And you somehow said Chip, and then you were saying Chip already.
I was like, Chip, threw Chip's war medals off the bridge.
And then I started calling you Chip, and then we started chipping out. Then you were Chip, then I was Chip, and then I came home and I called everyone at a sushi restaurant I worked at. I called them Chip, then they all started calling me Chip. And then all my group of friends, I said Chip, and then we made chip names, like different types of chip. Like
Yeah.
there's potato chip and bagel chip and apple chip, and there's so many chips. Chips Ahoy,
Tortilla chip.
tortilla chip. Mm-hmm.
I was OG Chip.
But then people would hear me call you Chip, and they're like, okay, wait, who's Chip? Are you Chip or is she Chip? And so you're the OG Chip, you're
OG.
Chip, and I'm the dip. And you put
Yeah.
your chip in my dip.
There you go.
So now you all know the origin story of Chip.
I know, and I'm getting a dog, and I really kind of contemplated calling him Chip. But then I was like, I don't know if I could do it.
I like the other Nigel.
Nigel.
Yeah.
My partner wants me to call him Honcho.
No, I'm Nigel. Nigel sounds so intelligent. Like I want you.
Hello, my name
like
is
a
Nigel.
Small, wiry, brilliant Nigel dog,
I know.
or Chip. You're still gonna.
What
call him
about
Chip.
Kevin?
I'm set on Nigel now that you brought
All
Nigel
right.
up.
I just thought of that while I was using your loo.
My Toodaloo.
Toodaloo.
So everyone, don't worry. This podcast is about sex. We have a wonderful speaker here.
Oh, wait. Can we tell our listeners super exciting news today?
Oh, because we got a shipment of wine.
Yeah, we just picked up some wine from Margins Wine. Check out marginswine.com. Sign up for the newsletter because they are already sold out of wine, this new release, but you can get on the next release.
Yum, yum, yum. I can't wait. If you are in California, April and I are teaching a workshop down in Grover Beach, California. Isn't that near San Luis Obispo?
Yes, it's near San Luis Obispo. It's about 3 hours south of Santa Cruz, 3.5 hours.
Grover, yeah. So Grover Beach, I think they said that it's close. It's between San Luis Obispo.
Can we plan a wine tasting while we go down there in like Paso Robles or something?
Yeah, let's do that.
Let's make it a date.
It is on
June
Friday,
28th.
June 28th. Yes, Friday, June 28th in the evening. We're teaching at Diamond Adult Store or Diamond Adult World, and it is in Grover Beach. They have multiple locations, and specifically the Grover Beach location. We're teaching oral sex for everyone.
all.
So this means you get to learn about how to please pussies, how to please penises, and all the in-betweens orally. And it is a lecture style, but we're
Oral.
practicing on our hands. So no, you're not going to be sucking cack in the class.
We might have some bananas involved as well.
Yeah, maybe some bananas.
Some nanners.
Or
What about some yucca?
Is that a potato?
No,
It's
is it
potato's cousin.
yucca?
We're not practicing on any
Oh, I'm thinking about
vegetables.
plantains.
No, yeah, we're not. So to learn more, if you want to learn with us in person, this is 2019, by the way, please go to diamondadult.com and you can learn more. They have a little tab for sales, events, and education, and hopefully the workshop will be on there.
It's going to be $25 and they're giving you a gift card for $20 at the door.
For sure?
That's for sure.
Okay. And if it's not, they changed it. Still come.
Still come. It's actually a great deal.
Yay. Yeah. So if you want to come learn with us, please come to that. We would love to see you. I have one special thing I want to share, Chip.
You have something special?
Well, so about my pussy. I'd like to share with you all a little story about my pussy. There was once a pussy named Amy, and it went meow, 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 meow. But then in 2017, it started to go. Meow.
Oh no! Is it sad
Sometimes
pussy?
it didn't even say anything. It was like. It was a quiet pussy. Pussy got turned down.
It's a sad pussy.
Yeah, and so there's been this journey that I've been on. If you're a regular listener, you've heard me learning more about tapping deeper into my body and to work through some old trauma and things like that. And we just did a wonderful podcast on vulva mapping recently, and which inspired me to go and do more sexological bodywork sessions. That's a hands-on educational session. It's for learning and for healing with someone who is trained in the anatomy and specifically in erotic touch for learning and healing. And so I actually went to the Bay Area and I'm doing at least 3 sessions minimum with someone named River, who is wonderful. I did a 90-minute session with River and I learned so much and I left there feeling so alive. It was profound. I went there feeling kind of just turned down or turned off. Talked a lot. I had sent in an intake form and talked a lot about what's going on in my body, where the disconnect started, this but constant rebuilding of reconnecting. And then we did this session and they guided me through something called the Bossy massage, which I won't go into much detail, but I essentially got to specify that when I got the touch and how I got the touch. And it was, again, to notice what the sensations were happening in my body, where I had sensation, where I didn't. And I saw the most interesting thing. They would have their finger just on one part of my body and hold it there, their finger, and not even move it. And I would feel sensation like, say the finger was on the base of my vaginal opening. This is specifically, I did this vulva mapping session with them. I was like, okay, I feel a little sensation. Whoa, all of a sudden I feel the inside of my vaginal canal pulsating. Whoa, I feel like my G-spot is filling up with fluid as if I'm going to ejaculate. I didn't, but now I can feel the upper left-hand side of my clit. But the finger was on the base of my vaginal
And this is
opening.
only just from a little pressure and different pressure points?
Yeah, from
that they were applying with their fingers, the practitioner.
Yes. And this is a buildup. They didn't just okay, lay on the table, I'm going to touch your pussy. It was such a buildup of me, of building the safety container, the consent container, starting with other types of touch before going to the vulva. But I saw how much pleasure and sensation is in my body, but I am blocking myself from seeing it by constantly feeling like I need to do something, like I need to get somewhere. And I know all the heady tools of how to slow down and be mindful. I'm doing that shit. I'm still getting in my own way from those subtle sensations and the slowness and stillness. So I wanted to share this with you because I left there super excited to keep doing this work. And River does work with people in person if you are in the Bay Area, as well as online. They do scar tissue remediation. They're a somatic sex educator. They do tension and trauma release, so that's TRE release exercises for folks who have trauma in their body. They're a pleasure activist. They're a certified somatic sex educator. They're an amazing human. I highly recommend, if you're someone who is feeling like you have trauma or you're numbed out or are having a hard time connecting to your bodies, please go and check this out. You can find out more information at riverdrosera.life. That's RIVERDROSERA.LIFE. You can do it from anywhere in the world because they work online. Although the hands-on part I'm talking about, that needs to be in person. Just so you know, they do not work with cis men, meaning you were born with a penis and they told you that you were a man or a boy and you still identify as that today. They do not do this type of work. They'll do sex coaching with you online, but they don't do hands-on work with cis men. But they actually also work with a lot of queer folks and trans folks and cis women. So I highly recommend it. Please go check it out if you're someone who's feeling stuck, lost, disconnected. game changer for me. And
That's
I'll keep
exciting.
You, and I'll
I
keep
love
you updated.
that.
I'm super excited.
There's been a lot of sex bod folks. Like this has been coming more into my peripheral than ever before. And I'm going to go have a session with Dolly, which I've never had any kind of work like that done before.
Yeah.
I mean, you've had more experience.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited / nervous to share my experience with the world of our podcast listeners after it happens, because I know there's a lot of folks out there.
Yeah.
I'm assuming the majority that don't know how comfortable they would be with that. So I'm here for you. I will share my experience as well, but it sounds like it's going to be pretty amazing.
Yeah. We'll continue to share our journeys with you, and not because we're trying to brag, but because we're wanting to let you know that this is available, and that a lot of folks feel lost and stuck. I think for this topic of this podcast, we're talking about sexless marriages. I think for a lot of those folks who feel like their desire has turned down or turned off, having a hands-on person, or at least a somatic sex and relationship coach who can guide you so you don't feel so lost.
Right.
You don't feel alone.
And they're a professional. They're not in there
It's not for their
with a
pleasure.
goal-oriented situation. So
they only touch you they keep their clothes on. You never touch. It's not about them at all. It's very safe and secure.
Speaking of touching oneself, well, that wasn't what we were speaking of, but now we are. What about our Instagram campaign? If you're not following
right now,
it is. And if you're not following us on Instagram, please do so. We've got some really great posts. We're at Shameless Sex Podcast on Instagram, and check it out. We're doing a 30-day masturbation campaign.
Yep.
And it's all about self-pleasure.
And people who, if you're just going to check it out right now, we've already. Everyone who is in it has already applied, but you can still kind of join by just creating your own practice, even if it's not for the full 30-day challenge. But go check us out. It's a wonderful way to celebrate and develop your own self-pleasure. And with that, Uberlube is actually one of the sponsors of that. They're donating some prizes. If y'all don't know about Uberlube, when it comes to touching genitals, you know your genitals are a mucous membrane, so taking your hand or a sex toy or anything to your genitals without lubrication does not feel good, because mucous membranes, they love them some lubrication. And there's a lot of shitty lubricants out there. There's a lot of lubricants that feel sticky and ugh. Uberlube is amazing. People try and they say, holy shit, I did not know lubricant could be this good. This is lube is what they say. They're like, what? I want this all over my body. It stays silky. It never gets sticky. It has no flavor. It has no scent. It's something that you want all over your body. The bottle itself is beautiful. Really, if you haven't...
Glass bottle
that you leave
cute
on your nightstand. It doesn't scream big, scary lube bottle. And it actually moisturizes your skin, especially if you're experiencing dryness. Oh, and for those super sensitive folks, if you have had a rash from other lubes, it's less likely to happen with Uberlube, because it doesn't have a whole bunch of nasty ingredients. So go check it out.
Yeah.
Go to uberlube.com, and our listeners get 10% off and free shipping with coupon code SHAMELESSSEX in all caps. So that's uberlube.com. You definitely want to check it out. And this is actually airing right after Mother's Day, so I'll just say happy late Mother's Day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a mom. You're not a mom.
Nope.
I'm like a
I might be a mom to Nigel soon.
Nigel. Can I be the godmama?
Yeah, sure.
Sweet.
You mean the doggy godmother?
I'll be the godmother.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
Because now Monty.
I'm still step mommy to Monty.
Okay.
Because
Well, that's good that you didn't lose custody.
No, I didn't. I mean, I did lose custody. I mean, I could ask to have Monty for a day or two, so I don't get too much Monty. But yeah,
the good news is we're gonna have a new mascot. Not that Monty's
Nigel.
replaced.
I'll get a little dog bed for
Yeah.
Nigel.
Yeah,
I'm
Nigel.
super excited. All right, everyone, are you ready to hear the bio? It's time, Chip. Are you ready?
I can't wait. Actually, this person was awesome to
Yes.
interview. She
Do
was
you know
filled
how to
with
pronounce her
such.
name?
Yes, I do. Janay
How about her last name?
Pailet.
Pailet. Yeah.
I said I just kind of did it.
You're
Pailet.
like, no matter what, it'll work. All right, everyone. So, her name actually, her first name starts with an X, so that's why it's confusing. Janay Pailet, best-selling author of the new book Living an Orgasmic Life, is a recovered New York City healthcare lawyer who lived in a sexless marriage for over 2 decades. After experiencing her own sexual healing and awakening in 2011, she transitioned her career into a full-time sex and intimacy educator and coach. She believes that pleasure is our birthright and is passionate about helping folks find their way into their bodies, back into their bodies, their desires, and their pleasure. She works with couples who are in sexless marriages and women and men who have experienced abuse and trauma. She helps them heal their wounds, release their shame, and reconnect with their desire and sexuality. And she offers one-on-one coaching and online group programs to empower women around their sexuality and strengthen couples' relationship and intimacy skills. To learn more, visit powerofpleasure.com. Ready? Here
I
we
can't wait.
go. All right, everyone, it's episode time. So funny, I took Somatica with Janay and just realized that we never worked together, meaning in Somatica, we do all these exercises where they will tell you, give you maybe half an hour lecture, and now they're say, for an hour, go practice this thing that we just taught you in a room of 60 people. And somehow Janay and I never got to practice these things on each other's bodies. What a loss. Now here we are virtually working together in a different way. So I obviously do know Janay a little bit, and I'm really looking forward to getting to know you more. This topic is super interesting to me and a lot of our listeners, because a lot of our listeners are in long-term relationships, long-term marriages, or maybe they plan on being one, or maybe they don't ever want to be in one again because of this topic. I don't know. So really happy to have you here on the show. Welcome, Janay.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here, and I love talking about sexless marriages. So perfect topic.
Well, yeah, I guess I'll ask you that first question. Is like, why do you love talking about sexless marriages? I'm assuming there is a part of your own personal journey. So, what got you to the place where you are today?
Yeah, so I was in a sexless marriage for, don't laugh, but 26 years. We signed our separation agreement on what would have been our 26th anniversary, wedding anniversary. I did that purposely.
Sexless from day one, or sexless from?
No, sexless from maybe year 6, 7, something like that.
Zero sex? What is sexless?
No, actually, in my marriage, that was mostly the case. But the way we define a sexless marriage is you're having sex less than 10 times a year. I don't know who puts up that definition. Maybe it's like asect, but that's the definition of sexless marriage.
So like less than once a month.
Less than once a month, right? Exactly. But we were definitely having sex a lot less than once a month. But the genesis of the sexless marriage was that sex had always been really painful for me. And I realized way later in my life that it was related to some experiences I had around sexual shame as a child that made me start to correlate sex and anxiety. And just generally like body shame. And it never got better. Women say like, oh yeah, the first time I had sex, it was painful. Like it never got better. It was always, I felt like there was the best way I can say is like, feels like a knife going into you. But this persisted into my marriage. I mean, I think probably in the beginning, my ex and I had some sex that wasn't so painful, but it quickly got really painful again. I had a lot of other things going on, endometriosis and pretty much anything that you could have, genourinary tract happened to me. And so after my second son was born, I was only 28 at the time. A couple of years after that, like we just stopped having sex. It was kind of my decision. We never talked about it, which was part of the problem. We never talked about anything having to do with our relationship or intimacy. Huge issue. And I just took all my sexual energy. I was a lawyer, healthcare lawyer by training. And at that time, I was probably running an organization in Washington, D.C. And I just took all of my energy and I just put it into my marriage and my kids and my career. And I'm sorry, my kids and my career, not my marriage. And life just kind of went on. And honestly, I was kind of happy. I was relieved, right? Because who wants to have sex when it's painful? It was never pleasurable. I never had any orgasms. I was constantly like, if we tried to have sex, I had a UTI or a vaginal infection or whatever it was. It was just such a big drag. So it made sense for me. For some period of time, it made sense for me.
And then I assume that shifted at some point where did you want to leave? Did your partner want to leave? Was that the reason why you were no longer married? Actually, I don't even know that. Are you still married?
Yeah, no, we're definitely not married. Yeah, I mean, as you know, like when you stop having sex, there's no intimacy, no kissing, no cuddling. We ended up sleeping in separate beds for 15 years. We lived in this beautiful apartment in New York City at the time, and we slept in separate beds for 15 years, which is, insane.
Just sort of companions, right? Just
Yeah, I mean, we were basically like, we were a really good parental unit. We were a really good familial unit. We had fun with our kids. It wasn't like there was a ton of like dissent and fighting, but it's like there was no connection. There was no love, and there was just, we couldn't talk of anything about our relationship, but we could talk about our kids forever and ever. But yeah, I mean, at some point, like I had a spiritual awakening. I started going to this Unity church, and that started to help me like connect with like my desires. I didn't even know I had desires, and it made me realize like I needed to get out of the marriage. Like that was just clear. And then there was also something, even though I was so sexually shut down, I just like, I knew that I had to like, there was a desire to do something with the sexuality. So, ultimately we did separate when I was just had turned 50. And yeah, and then I found myself like single in New York City, 50 years old, wanting to date and, have fun, find another relationship. And I had this issue that I couldn't have sex.
so you physically couldn't really have sex.
It was very, very painful. I had vaginismus.
Oh, wow.
So it
Okay.
wasn't diagnosed quite yet.
It was never really officially diagnosed.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like the vagina was completely shut, but, I could get a tampon in, like maybe a super tampon. That was it. That was the most that I could ever get in.
So that's a huge reason to have a sexless marriage right there. If sex is painful all the time, which I'm sure our listeners out there, there's treatment for that. We've had, a pelvic floor specialist. There's a lot of different resources that you can check out. For sake of also for this podcast and for other folks out there that perhaps aren't having painful sex but are having sexless marriages, what are some of the other reasons that trigger these situations? And maybe not even a marriage, maybe it's a sexless relationship.
Yeah, for most people, it's not necessarily painful sex, although as you're right, like 30% of women experience pain during sex. And a lot of times we just like put up with it because that's what we think we're supposed to do, right? But I think what really happens in most sexless marriages that I work with is first there's the kids. And, kids take up a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of touching. And often that really just kills a woman's sex drive. And then it starts getting awkward because, we haven't had sex in 6 months, and then we haven't had sex in 9 months. And like, then we try to have sex and it feels really weird because like we haven't been intimate. So there's been that muscle hasn't actually been exercised. So that's, I think, a big reason, one of the big reasons, like kids change the dynamic. And if you're not really on top of that and you're not talking about it and communicating and being aware of it and planning to stay intimate, it's super easy for your sex life just to devolve into nothing. I think that a lot of reasons, I bet you're going to all agree with me with this, I hope you will, is that like most women don't really have very good sex.
Oh yeah, this is true.
Right? They don't have very good sex. So if either you're having obligation sex because you feel you're supposed to do that, which still a lot of my clients were told by their parents, by their mother, it's your duty to have sex, or you are not really having good sex because you're not aroused enough, which is a huge issue for most women. And sex only feels okay, or it feels uncomfortable. Like, who wants to do it? It ends up going at the bottom of your to-do list, right? And we end up putting up with a lot of different excuses and reasons why we don't want to have sex. I think another reason, and this is a very big reason, is that there are issues in the relationship. Yeah, very often a sexless marriage is really just a symptom of the fact that there are really serious problems in the relationship. There's no communication, there's no intimacy, there's no connection. And, when none of that happens, we don't want to have sex for sure for most women, and often also for men as well. So I think those are some of the major reasons that, couples fall into sexless marriages. I don't think it's rarely intentional. And it usually happens slowly over a period of time. And all of a sudden you wake up one your day and you're like, holy shit, I haven't had sex in 6 months.
And I
Or
don't
we
even
haven't had
want
sex in
to.
a year. And I don't
Yeah.
even want to. And I have no desire, right? And then you have the loss of desire is a huge piece around it.
Have you heard of OMGS before?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I had a client in my sex and relationship coaching practice when I had a client who had been married. They're in their 30s. They had been married for maybe 5 years. They wanted to have a baby and get pregnant, but they didn't like having sex with their husband. And I was like, maybe you want to work on this stuff before you go have the baby. But what depends what your priorities are, of course, depends what your priorities, but it's not going to make your sex life easier. Let me tell you that. But I asked, I said, so what you're not liking sex, you're not wanting sex, you're not enjoying it, what kind of sex are you having? And the kind of sex they're having was the porn sex. It's the thrusting, it's the if she's on top, she's hopping up and down, it's exhausting, it's hitting all the wrong spots and not hitting the clitoris. And I literally in the session was showing her, more of I was on the ground doing more of like a hip rocking grinding thing. And so she was like, wait, I can do that. So there's that piece that you're speaking to. Of course you don't want to have sex. It's not hitting all the spots that your body actually likes. And then the other thing I did with her is I actually had she actually mentioned OMGS to me, and I already knew of OMGS. So we talked about OMGS and I said, this is good homework for you. To go try OMGS. And for those of you who have never listened to our podcast, we talk about it all the time. It's an online educational program that has these videos that are very tastefully done. And the season 1 is all about external pleasure. It interviews these female identified folks talking about how they're vulva owners. There's the pleasure they have, how the orgasms they have, how they learn to have these orgasms, and the type of touch. And you get to watch these very tasteful, maybe 2 to 3 minute videos that shows you these techniques. And so my client's homework was to go home, watch this, try it, and learn what her body liked. And she came back 1 week later and she's like, holy shit. I figured out that I like this. I had no idea. So her mind was blown, and it was so easy to do with these videos versus trying to read a book, or it was so much easier. And reading a book, of course, is great. It's definitely great. And I think some folks are much more visual. So she just didn't feel as lost. And then the next step of homework was share this with your husband. Have them watch and tell them, okay, I liked video number 5. Go watch and we can do together, or let's watch together. And I don't know how the sex is. I haven't seen her in a while. I just know she has a baby now. So.
Awesome. Well, something's working.
Yeah. So for our listeners, if you want to learn more about OMGS, go to omgs.com/shameless. Our listeners get $5 off. And season 2 actually should be out as well. So love those points. I guess one question I want to ask you real quickly. Is there are you seeing more sexless marriages than sexless long-term relationships? Is there a difference, like once people put the rock on the finger, that really shifts things in whether they're together 10 years married or not?
That's a really good, it's an interesting question. I don't know I have seen plenty of couples who are not married, who are in sexless long-term relationships. They just chose not to get married, but they feel like they're married. So I don't know if the rock, if you will, like if the legal contract actually has an impact. I think it's the long-term component of it that is really, is the common denominator between the two of them. I think, there's a lot of reasons that people get bored in long-term relationships. First of all, most of the time sex is just super boring. Yeah. And, like people are not creative and don't even have the education to know, what else might be possible or available. And I think there was just a research study that came out. I don't know if you guys saw it. I don't know, it's like over the summer, a couple of months ago, that said that in sexual relationships, women get bored a lot easier than men. So men can do the same thing and have vanilla sex, and they're perfectly happy. It makes perfect sense to me, right? But women are actually the gender that needs to have more stimulation. They have to do different things, more variety.
Yeah.
And I hear that complaint all the time from my female clients, how bored they are, right? How uninteresting sex is.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember we talked about that with Wednesday Martin. She was talking about that study, and that women are deemed as they want the monogamous white picket fence, one man forever. And here we're finding that they're actually getting bored earlier than the men are in those long-term relationships. Men are a little more content with just having decent sex, once a week, and the women are a little more like, so about that missionary decent sex that we have every Tuesday.
Yeah, right.
I want great sex. I want deep connection. I want variety. And if I don't get it, then I might go a little stir crazy.
And that's the thing. What do you do? And maybe you, Janay, have a good, some good advice. So you have one partner in the relationship that wants sex all the time, or minimally, or however, and the other doesn't. What do you think that these couples? What are they to do?
Well, I mean, this is one of the biggest issues, right? Because the person with the lowest desire has the most power in the relationship. They get to actually control when they have sex. So, for me, like if I was working with them, first of all, I'd want to understand, why is your desire so low? What's actually going on? 9 times out of 10, it's like they're not getting what they want, right? Their desire is low. I was just working with a couple last night, actually, and they haven't had sex in, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. And I finally I worked with him alone individually. I'm like, okay, what's actually going on here? What is it that you actually want? Well, I there's something that I actually want that I'm afraid to tell my partner about it. It's not a big deal, right? But do you know what I'm saying? I'm like, well, of course sex is boring for you. You're never getting what you want. That's a big reason why, there is a low desire partner to start with. And typically, I mean, broad generalization here, but in my experience with my clients, most of the times it's the women who have the low desire. Occasionally, I mean, maybe like 1 out of 20, a couple will come in and it's actually the woman who really is horny, and it's the man who doesn't want to have sex. But even then, there's like, okay, what's actually really going on? So I think that's the first thing, is like diagnosing it, what's actually happening. And then, the second part of it is like, sometimes just having sex in a different room of the house can make it more interesting, right?
Breaking up the monotony.
Let's have sex on the bed. Let's have sex on the floor. Let's have sex in the bathroom, right? Like, let's have sex in our hot tub. Like, sometimes you don't have to be like, the word that I say is creative and curious, right? Like, I encourage couples to be incredibly curious. Like, how do we do something different? The Paul, what's his name's book, Paul Joannita's book, The Guide to Getting It On, right? Like 500 different sexual things that you can do. There's other things, but I think that's like a good source book. So getting really curious and mixing it up, and not doing the same thing, all the time. And also, like, I guess I should call it the 3 C's: curious, communication, and what was the other thing I said? I can't remember. But also communicating, talking about like what's going on. Like, let's have a check-in about our sex life. Are we both having a good time? Are we not having a good time? Is there something we want to try? Do we want to like bring somebody else into the relationship? Do we want to try a threesome, right? Like, there's so many opportunities and ways in which you can experience sex in long-term relationships, and people just get really like, just like we go to the same restaurant, we get complacent, right? Yeah. Exactly.
That could be another C. Another one to see.
I'm building the class. Embrace it.
And I think that we've talked about this before. Even if you've been in a relationship for 20 years, that doesn't mean that you're psychic to your partner's needs or exactly what they want in the bedroom. And the only way that you're going to be able to communicate those things to your partner is by actually saying those things. And if you're uncomfortable with that, figure it out with yourself, practice within yourself, and then talk about it. Otherwise, there's nowhere to go but into this kind of sexless marriage situation, which brings me to a really great point. So let's say, okay, you're in a relationship and it feels good. And then you realize it's been 3 months, maybe since you've had sex, or maybe it's been 6 months. So I don't know. What are I guess if you what are the indicators that a relationship could be headed towards this sexless way? And are there preventative measures that can be taken? I mean, obviously everyone's different with their amount of needs with sex, but
Right.
I'm just curious.
I mean, I think the first thing that I begin to look at, and I always ask couples this, like, okay, so you're not having sex. Are you still having intimacy? Right? Are you still kissing? So many people don't kiss. Right. And that's one of the saddest things, but I see that in long-term relationships all the time. Like I will actually have a couple do a makeout session where I have to kind of teach them how to have a makeout, because they've forgotten how to do that. And we know that women actually need deep kissing in order to reach orgasm. It's one of the trifectas, right? So, what else? Those are the signs that start to happen. Are we not kissing anymore? Are we not cuddling anymore? Are we not touching anymore? Like that's how it usually starts. It usually starts with a lack of intimacy. Things just start to feel more distant between each other. And then the sex stops happening. That's typically typically what happens. In terms of like, how do you prevent it from happening? Or when you start to see it happening, I think it's all about like communication, right? I mean, one piece is communication, like realizing it's happening. And the second piece is, and this I think is really important in long-term relationships, is you got to put it on the calendar. Like you got to have a sex date on the calendar, not like we go to the movies and have a dinner and come home at 11 o'clock.
That's not a sex date. Yeah.
It's not a sex
I
date,
always
right?
suggest
That's
before
a
dinner.
date night before dinner, right? That's a date night. But you need to have a sex date and you need to put it on the calendar so that it maintains, because it's a statement. You're saying to each other, this is a priority in our life and it's so important. We're going to put it on the calendar. And then it maintains staying a priority. And I think the couples that have the best relationships really make sex a priority, and they do things like put it on the calendar, and they get a babysitter and go get a hotel room for the night if they don't have in-laws or grandparents who can come and take care of the kids, right? And really make it a priority.
What would your advice be to the sexless marriage? I'm just going to gender it. Say there's a woman that feels like, or no, I'll switch roles. I'll switch it up. Actually, I'm gonna switch roles. A man who's in there and it's a heterosexual relationship, and he has very low desire, low libido. Actually, we've had sex questions from these people. I don't really need a lot of sex. I'm fine not having sex. My partner wants more sex. This is actually, we had this from a straight man, and they were worried about their partner leaving them. Would your advice, I hear what you're saying, is what's really going on there? Do you ever really see that it's just hormones? You just have low testosterone. You just have.
Oh yeah. Whenever somebody comes to me with a low desire, I always, like female or male, it's like, okay, have you had your hormones tested? Like, let's really, let's first take a look at that and see, is there low testosterone? What's happening with your estrogen levels as well, especially for, perimenopausal and menopausal women. I mean, there is definitely, their hormones can definitely wreak havoc. They can. That's definitely something that you want to be aware of. First, we always look at, is there a physiological basis?
Yeah.
And if there's not a physiological basis, then there's a psychological, emotional basis that we actually have to, address. But, I think another option is to say like, okay, I have a low desire partner. Their testosterone is totally fine. They seem to be happy being more in the friend zone, and, everything is going well in the relationship, but I really want to go have sex. So what am I going to do? Well, you have a conversation about it and you say like, let's have a conversation or a discussion about me being able to get my needs met outside of the marriage in a way that, feels safe for both of us. And, I bring this up to couples all the time. Sometimes they look at me like I'm absolutely gone apeshit crazy.
How dare you? Yeah.
Most of the time, right? But I'm like, hey, like, just keep that as a possibility, right? Because otherwise what might happen is that your wife is going to go have an affair. So it may happen either way. It's just a matter of whether you know about it and you're on board. or, it happens behind your back, right? Like there's only so many options. As Celeste and Danielle would say, there's like 4 options, right? That can
The
actually
menu, you're eating off the kitty menu. Yeah, get off the kitty
exactly,
menu. And
exactly.
so then I guess kind of aligning with that too. And so, say an example of that, there's someone who still has low desire. So they say, I'm fine having sex once a week. The other person has really high desire. They want sex every day. We talked about this on our podcast, and I'm going to throw this out there. I'm sure that you see if there's anything else that you want to elaborate on. But what we share often is like a meeting of each other, right? If you're not going to open the relationship up to have needs met elsewhere, or you're not going to break up, there's also a way that we can meet each other to so you're 1 day a week and I'm 7 days a week. Okay, let's meet in the middle. 3 days a week, 4 days a week. And what does sex mean? Is it just penetration? Is it dry humping? I don't wonder if you have anything else you want to elaborate with that on kind of how, if people do want to stay in a monogamous relationship, the ways that they can work with that.
Yeah, no, I think that's super important. Like the definition of sex needs to be much, much, much broader, right? And that takes a lot of pressure off. Very often, I think women don't want to always have penetration, and they're like afraid if they do naked cuddling with their partner that they're just going to feel his heart on, and I'm going to have sex, and I don't actually want to have penetrative sex, right? Because I'm probably not aroused if I'm just naked cuddling. There has to be, you negotiate, right? You negotiate, you define what would make you feel happy. Maybe it's like, I just want you to, I'm going to masturbate and you're going to witness my masturbation, right? Maybe that will be enough to satisfy me as well. And then also, like, I think this is a really important concept. Everybody's responsible for their own arousal. Everybody's responsible for their own orgasm. When we give up our orgasm, when we give up our arousal to a partner, we actually disempower ourselves, and they disempower themselves as well. And so, like, great, you're horny, you want to have sex, like, go at it, have your, use your vibrator. Here's a great dildo, right? There's a lot of other ways in which you can satisfy yourself, and that it shouldn't put all of the pressure on the other person.
And we're doing this 30-day self-pleasure campaign it's May. May is masturbation month. And that's a great segue to talk about that, because people, they don't know what they want. Just as Amy was talking about with her client, and you've seen with your clients, sometimes you don't know what you want unless you try to figure it out on your own. And then learning how to communicate those things is the next way to go. And for me, I was only able to actually orgasm through self-pleasure. I had to learn how to actually orgasm with a partner. So I'm a little bit different in the sense that I almost get stage fright when I'm in the midst of an intimate moment or being touched, or I focus on the expectations of what I should be doing, or from porn and all sorts of terrible educative tools that I shouldn't have used as educative tools back in the day. Now I'm learning. It only took me 35 years or more at this point, but I would love to hear any final tips, or just, some of those juicy ingredients for keeping that fire burning, because we get that so much, that question from folks so much. And obviously people, not only in marriages, but anyone in a long-term relationship of any sort, they're going to want to know how to keep it burning, with children, without children. So can you share with our listeners some?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the ways to keep the fire burning is, and it's especially important in the male-female dynamic, right? Because we know that, like, touch a man's penis, he's hard, he's ready to go, right? But women are not like that. And so one of the most important things is basically to, like, I talk about it, like, keep the pot simmering. Keep the pot simmering so we don't have to go from cold to boil. We can go from, like, warm to boil. It takes a lot less time. And ways to keep that pot simmering are flirting with each other, sending sexy texts to each other. I often will suggest to my couples, like, yeah, just walk by her and give her a little bite on the neck. That's it. just like a reminder of like, hey, you're hot and I just want to show you a little bit of affection, but you're not going to get what you want, right? So we want to really build up the sexual tension. And you can do that over a whole week period of time, knowing that you have a date on Saturday night, keeps the pot burning, keeps the water simmering. And that also often will mean that it's easier to have spontaneous sex, because if the pot's simmering, then she's going to be more aroused and can more easily have a quickie without having to go through, in my opinion, a 30 to 45 minute, foreplay situation. So that's, I think, one of the best tips that I have for long-term relationships.
Yeah. Simmer, let it simmer. It's true. It's like staying at an 8 instead of being at a 10, right? You don't have to boil over. Keep it simmering. I like that.
And I would imagine having your own erotic self-care practice would be a part of that, is, not just relying on your partner to keep you simmering, right? To keep yourself simmering through your own practices that keep you connected to your eroticism and your body. And I can speak for myself, and I know a number of people that when they have some sort of trauma, even if it's not sexual trauma, they have a trauma in life, or they're grieving, maybe someone dies in their life, and their sexuality leaves for a little while because of course all your energy is going to this other area of grieving or pain or sadness or trauma, and so maybe in those moments it's not available, but then there's the rebuilding part of creating practices to now I'm like, now I don't even have a Pilate light, right? I don't even have a little fire built at all. Now I have to completely relight the fire and then get it simmering. And it's, so I get what you're saying. And I want to encourage people to, I think there's a really important piece there about keep creating your own practices and not holding someone else to keep you simmering all the time.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
How can people work with you? I know that we see you online, so I assume you work online. Can you share again about your book, how people can work with you, how they can find you?
Sure. So my website is poweroffpleasure.com. I work primarily on Zoom. I do some in-person work in San Francisco area. And I also have a women's online group coaching program, which is currently called the Empowered Women's Guide to Orgasmic Bliss. Is going to be changed into a new name around, I can't remember what I came up with, but a new name about rekindling attraction or desire. That's what it is. And teach workshops throughout the Bay Area as well. My book is called Living an Orgasmic Life, Heal Yourself and Awaken Your Pleasure. The first part of it focuses on healing our issues with sex, especially around trauma. And the second part is like, how do you awaken your pleasure and have better, more connected, more juicy sex? And you can find that on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And in a lot of most of the sex stores are actually carrying the book. Yay.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your wonderful info and guidance. I would love to have you back. I love me a good speaker.
Well, this is a topic that could really go on for a long time. And I'm sure, I mean, depending on your level of expertise, you even have more that you could share for helping spice up that sexless marriages. But buying the book is probably the best idea. Instant gratification. Yeah. I loved meeting you, though. Thank you. And I hope to see you soon. If you're in Santa Cruz, call us.
I will. Thanks for inviting me. This is super fun.
Beach vacation calls your name. Now everyone's like, wait, can I come too? Yeah. All right, everyone. But before we end, we usually end with April being like, ciao for now, but we're not doing that right now because this is, I think, our last week of sharing a pilot episode. That's not true. It's not a pilot. It's a trailer of podcasts that we love, other sex-related podcasts. This one is awesome. I actually listened to 2 episodes the other day as I was driving. It's called Sex Talk with My Mom, with Cam and his mom. They're from the Midwest. I think
he's a comedian, right?
He's a stand-up comedian. He's a mime, a professional clown, and he has a podcast called Sex Talk with My Mom, and him and his mom talk about sex. It's a really great podcast. And I listened to it. I was driving. I was cracking up while driving. Like it was that good where I'm just like laughing to myself. It was really good. I highly suggest it. So go check out Sex Talk with My Mom. It's on all the podcast apps. And here is a trailer for you. And if you fall in love with them, please still listen to us. We love you too. Enjoy.
It's uncomfortable to talk about sex, but sometimes it's important to get uncomfortable. Sex Talk with My Mom is the best mom-son podcast about sex.
It is the only one as well.
My mother is a cougar.
My son is a clown.
In a nutshell, my dad died, so my mother decided to create a YouTube channel all about sex, like all mothers do.
And then my son decides to use my material in his stand-up comedy routines.
And thus, Sex Talk with My Mom was born. Each week we interview comedians.
She starts sucking my dick, and I'm like, whoa, I guess pornos are real.
We also talk to sex experts.
I could bottom in a really dominant way. I can be like, bitch, pick up that flogger and hit me with it now.
And we also talk to our ex-lovers.
I was not that experienced with fingering. So we start...
Not that experienced?
I wasn't that experienced. I'm picking up from like what I've seen on porn,
He
which
was
is...
hovering. He was hoverboarding it.
We've been featured in Esquire magazine, on the Today Show.
At Second City in Chicago.
Subscribe to Sex Talk with My Mom.
Don't forget to head on over to our website at shamelesssex.com for more. And for 15% off of some of our favorite sex toys, use coupon code SHAMELESSPP in all caps at purepleasureshop.com.